Somehow, he would have to live the rest of his life as a cripple. Forget being a hunter, it wouldn't be possible for him to even live a normal life. With no special talents or learned skills, he did not see a happy life ahead of him. Then there's mother's hospital bills, and Jinna's education expenses. Since there was no way he'd be able to support them with this injury, he thought to at least provide for them through his death. Let's see, the compensation for death during a raid was 300 million won to the surviving family. Or was it 400 million? Compared to the worthless life of an E-ranker, it was a rather generous compensation. They were here. The first statue to arrive took a step towards the altar. Jinwoo looked towards him and raised his sword. Come, but the first attack came from behind. Stab. The spear that pierced his back now protruded out of his chest. Jinwoo threw up a large amount of blood. The pain assaulted his senses like hail. If the place you were stabbed in was just a bit higher, it would have pierced your heart. Juhi's words from earlier flashed across his mind. The statue raised its spear and with it, Jinwoo. Still skewered to the weapon, Jinwoo found himself suspended in air. As he flailed his legs in pain, the statue slammed him towards the ground. Bang! Crack, crack, crack. He heard the sound of bones breaking throughout his entire body. There was nowhere he did not feel pain. One by one, the statues gathered around the convulsing Jinwoo, who glared up at them. I don't want to die like this. As death crept closer and closer, tears formed in his eyes. His family appeared in his mind. Juhi, who worried for him until the last minute, also appeared in his mind. I don't want to die. To end his life at a young age of 24. Step. A statue wielding a sword walked towards him with an expressionless face. Even as his entire body shook, Jinwoo did not look away from its gaze. Finally, the statue's raised sword fell down towards him. Just one more, if I had just one more chance. Jinwoo's eyes widened at the falling sword. It was in that moment, as if someone had pressed the pause button on a video, the falling sword stopped before his eyes. No, not stopped. Slowed to a crawl, almost as if it was stopped. Millimeter by millimeter, the sword was definitely still coming down at him. He could not hide his surprise. Then, a female voice he had never heard before in his life rang throughout his head. Secret quest. Fulfilled all conditions. He had no idea what it was saying. No, before that, where is that voice coming from? Ignoring his thoughts, the voice continued. You've obtained the right to become a player. Do you accept? Obtain the right. Accept? It sounds like it's giving me something. Growing up in poverty, he knew there was no such thing as free in life. But I suppose that was in life. What does any of it matter in death? As he waited in hesitation, the voice in his head asked again. You do not have much allowed time remaining. In the case the right is refused, your heart will stop in 0.02 seconds. Do you accept? Whether or not this was a hallucination, one thing was certain, his impending death. On top of the sword slowly coming down on his head, the other statue's weapons were also finding their way towards him. At this point, Jinwoo gave himself up to resignation. Sure, why not? He did not speak the words out loud, merely thought them in his head. But the voice answered his thoughts. Flash, a blinding light surrounded his body, and Jinwoo lost consciousness. He opened his eyes. A bright white ceiling, the stinging smell of disinfectant, feeling of a hard bed behind his back. Jinwoo immediately realized where he had opened his eyes. A hospital. Although he found himself coming less and less after meeting the B-rank healer class hunter Juhi, the hospital was still a place Jinwoo could call a second home in his job. After all, there were even rumors that there was a room reserved just for him here. Jinwoo sat upright. Holding his hand up to his chest, he felt the regular beating of his heart. I'm alive, not just alive. His entire body felt lighter than usual. Compared to the heaviness he felt when he would normally open his eyes here, something was different. It was as if he woke up after a good rest in his own home. When he remembered the scene before he passed out, it was an unthinkable occurrence. The falling sword, the statues that surrounded him. Even if he had somehow dodged the sword, it would take a party composed of S-rank hunters to defeat the enemies in that room. And I came out of there alive. Was it a dream? Thankfully, there was an easy way to find out. Jinwoo looked underneath the blanket covering him. If it was all real, he would be missing a leg. Then, a deep voice interrupted him. Have you regained consciousness? Two men kitted out in black business suits approached Jinwoo's bed. The youth tilted his head and asked them, Who are you? He had never seen these two's faces before. One of them with the close-cropped hair like a soldier and wearing a pair of sunglasses presented him with a business card. This is who we are. Jinwoo received the business card and read what was written on it. Woo Jin-cheol, the section chief of the monitoring division, the Korean Hunters Association. I was unconscious for 4 days. Just how did I get to this hospital? Did a large guild participate and kill those DMN things? Well, actually, Wu Jinqiao awkwardly opened his mouth. By the time the agents of the monitoring division and the White Tiger Guild arrived at the scene after being briefed by the survivors, everything was gone. The only thing to be found within that open space was you, Mr. Xiang Jin Wu. There was not one trace of the god statue nor the stone statues. Come again. Jin Wu displayed a shocked, disbelieving face. It's hard for us to believe it as well. If there had been any inconsistencies in the testimonies of the survivors, or if we had failed to find the remains of the victims in the chamber, we might have suspected something fishy was going on. Wu Jinqiao carefully studied Jin Wu's reactions as he continued on. We suspect that Hunter Xiang Jin Wu Nim might have gone through another awakening. Another awakening. Jin Wu's eyes shot open wide. Although extremely rare, there had been instances of a human who had awakened his or her abilities as a hunter going through yet another awakening. Often referred to as reawakening, those who undergo this process would normally become extremely powerful compared to before. Originally, once a hunter's rank was assigned at the beginning, it rarely changed. A hunter's abilities were determined the moment one went through an awakening, that was why. However, it was a different story for those going through the reawakening process, jumping past their own limitations to rise up from, say, rank C to A, or even from B to S. Such things had happened before. The god statue was said to have melted rank C hunters with nothing but its eyes, according to the survivors. If one were able to kill such a creature even while unconscious, just how powerful one could possibly be. To prepare for this unlikeliest possibility, Wu Jinqiao labeled this incident as top secret and made sure everyone involved would keep their mouths shut. Wu Jinqiao's chest began beating real fast. Could Korea finally have a hunter on the level of an international powerhouse? Of course, confirming the truth of the reawakening wasn't difficult at all. Didn't the wise elders once say to make hay while the sun still shines? Wu Jinqiao signaled to his lackey, "Bring it here." Although this device had been miniaturized, its efficiency or accuracy did not fall short of the actual full-size measuring device located in the Hunters Association. Jin Wu placed his hand on top of the black crystal and soon enough, warm rays of light oozed out from it. Cold sweat drops formed on the foreheads of Wu Jinqiao and his lackey. Not too long after then, the light surrounding the crystal dissipated. Wu Jinqiao hurriedly took off his sunglasses and confirmed the numbers. Right away, a small earthquake rocked Wu Jinqiao's eyes. How can this be? He rechecked the numbers, but it remained the same. How could a person holding a hunter license possess the magic energy value of only 10? When considering the fact that the lowest average value for rank E, the bottom rank, was around 70 to 100, Xiang Jin Wu was no different from a regular person. Wu Jinqiao rapidly realized that being here was a waste of time, so he got up from his seat. "Let's go." "Yes, sir." Wu Jinqiao and his lackey quickly packed up to leave. "Thank you for your cooperation. If you remember anything else, please give us a call anytime." As if their rear ends were on fire, two men in black rapidly left the room as soon as they put away the device. The hospital room that felt rather small suddenly became quiet and lonely. He looked up without thinking, and then saw words floating in the air. He closed his eyes and opened them again. The words remained floating up there without a single change. He shook his head hard a few times and even rubbed his eyes, but they were still there. Jin Wu massaged his aching forehead and lowered his head. "It hadn't been a long time since I started hearing weird things, but now I'm even seeing them, too." Could something in his head really be broken? There was a condition called PTSD, after all. It was only a few days ago since he witnessed the deaths of many of his comrades, not to mention he himself nearly died as well, so it would not be so strange to hear or see weird things as a possible side effect. However, there were a couple of things that prevented him from dismissing this out of hand. Jin Wu's sight lowered to his leg. The leg that got cut in half by the shield of the stone statue was now all fine and dandy. The voice he heard out of the blue inside the underground temple hidden within the depths of the dual dungeon. His completely cured leg, and now, those words floating in front of his eyes. Too many weird things were happening all at once. What if there was a chance that all these things were not isolated events but linked to one another? Once the confusion in his heart died down and he felt calmer, he became quite curious about the contents of those so-called unread messages. There might be answers to his questions found within those messages, after all. In order to confirm the messages, he reached out towards the words, and his hand simply went past them. It's not touch-operated. It seemed that he got way too used to how a smartphone worked. Check messages. Reading. I want to read. I want to look. Hey, show me already, will ya? Just what is it that you wish to see that bad? He felt a cold, probing stare coming from the side, so he turned his head to look, and spotted his little sister in her school uniform looking at him from the gap of the half-open door. Boom. Jinwoo became speechless. Maybe you hurt your head really bad. The younger sister stood at a distance away and asked Jinwoo, "Are you really okay?" "Yes, I'm telling you the truth. I told you to stop getting hurt. You have any idea how worried I was?" "I'm sorry. Other people walk away fine, but how come it's only you who gets hurt all the time?" "Sorry. I was thinking of leaving behind this kid alone and dying, wasn't I?" What a relief that he made it out alive. Jinwoo's gaze shifted ever so slightly towards the words floating in the air. "It still feels like I haven't completely woken up from that nightmare just yet, doesn't it?" There were so many things he couldn't understand. But, so what? The most important thing was that he came back alive, and he got to see his little sister again. "Do you hear me? If you get hurt one more time, I'm going to give up on studying, find a job, and make sure you don't work as a hunter ever again." "Hey, Jin-ah." "Yeah? When you are playing video games." Jin-ah smirked softly. "I don't play games anymore. The third year of high school is only a few days away, you know." I know. When there are unread messages in a game, what should I do? Access them. You gotta open the mailbox first." As soon as Jinwoo said the word open, a clear beep entered his head and the hidden messages revealed themselves. "Congratulations on becoming a..." Jinwoo smiled brightly. Finally, seeing her older brother's complexion suddenly brighten like that, Jin-ah felt something was wrong and quickly asked him, "What's up? What game is it? You need my help?" Jinwoo firmly shook his head. "Nope, no need. I'll do it alone." How would his younger sibling react if he told her what had been happening to him right now? I really don't want to be labeled as a loon by her. "Congratulations on becoming a..." He thought that the first message sounded familiar, as if he heard it before from somewhere. Where have I heard it from? I know I have. He heard those words just before he lost his consciousness. The system, growth, penalties, and finally, rewards. The words with unknown meanings fell on his lap one after the other. Just what will it help grow, and what will it reward me with? He decided to worry about the confusing words later and calmly opened the next message. "Is now available." Gulp. Jinwoo unconsciously swallowed his saliva after reading that rather suggestive title. His heart began to beat faster in anticipation. Confirm. Press up 100 times, incomplete. Sit up 100 times, incomplete. Squat 100 times, incomplete. Running 10 kilometers, incomplete. Incompletion of daily quests will result in appropriate levels of punishment. Jinwoo reflexively spat out a dumbfounded chuckle after confirming the contents of the message. Ha. Seriously, man, should this be the feelings of disappointment? To think, what the grand-sounding daily quest, the one titled Preparations to Become Strong, was nothing more than a list of physical exercises to train his body. Well, for sure, if he did as the quest said, then his body might get a bit tougher. Jinwoo shook his head. He suddenly thought that he was a fool for searching for answers to his many questions from a DMN hallucination. I'm sure these hallucinations and weird things I hear will eventually go away with time. His eyelids slowly closed shut, and Jinwoo drifted away into a deep slumber. Tick-tock. Even when Jinwoo was softly snoring to himself, the needles of the clock hanging by the wall continued to tick away. The needles spun and spun around until they indicated 11 hours, 59 minutes and 57 seconds p.m. Tick-tock, tick. 58, 59, 60. Jinwoo's eyes shot right open from the violent tremor that shook his entire body. An earthquake. Jinwoo sat right up and grabbed the edges of the bed. The shaking was so bad that he couldn't maintain his balance. Rumble. The shaking got progressively worse as the seconds ticked by. It happened then. One of the steel bars on the bed he held on for dear life suddenly broke. No, it didn't break per se, but simply disappeared. Jinwoo hurriedly looked at his palm. No steel bar there, just grains of sand. Sand. Jinwoo spat out the sand in his mouth and hurriedly raised his head up. His eyes caught the sight on an endless plain of nothing but sand. Jinwoo frowned heavily and got up. All the sand that found its way inside his clothes poured out. He dusted the sand caked on his chest while taking a look around him. Indeed, all he could see was sand. And more sand. A desert. This couldn't be real. Until a few moments ago, he was sleeping on a bed inside a hospital located in the middle of Seoul. But now, as soon as he opened his eyes, he was in the middle of a massive desert. Jinwoo scooped up a handful of sand and let it slip through his fingers. The fine grains fell straight down to the ground. He was getting a really bad premonition right about now. Sure enough, just as Jinwoo took a step back, the sand within the pit suddenly exploded upwards. The falling sand emitted the roar of a waterfall. Jinwoo's eyes went extra round in the meantime. An insect. The identity of the thing that exploded out from the sand was a giant centipede. When fully revealed, the DMN thing's head almost reached the height equaling that of a 5-story building. Jin-Woo anxiously swallowed his saliva. This is unreal. For sure, the beastard was unrealistically huge. He had never heard of a centipede this big existing in the world before. Goal: please survive until the end of the time limit. Time limit: 4 hours. Remaining time: 4 hours 0 minutes 0 seconds. Are you kidding me? However, as soon as the remaining time changed to 3 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds, the centipede parted sand and rushed towards him as if it couldn't wait any longer. Wow, what the hell? Jin-Woo hurriedly spun around and ran for his life. There was no time to deliberate on things. If he wanted to live, then he had to run. That was the only thought racing in his head. However, even before he had taken several steps, another pillar of sand exploded upwards not too far from his position. Jin-Woo fell on his rear from the powerful shockwave. He rolled on the sandy ground before urgently getting back up. He swiped the sand off his face before his eyes shot open even wider. This time, it wasn't just one or two of them. Boom. Before he had even noticed it, there were 7 sand centipedes jutting out from the sand, and they were all glaring at him. As the centipedes issued shrill cries, Jin-Woo's complexion changed for the worse. Jin-Woo reappeared in the hospital room exactly 4 hours later. Plop. Jin-Woo keeled over on the floor and painfully wheezed out. Cough, cough. His mouth felt full with this coarse, grainy taste. His eyes stung badly too, seemingly like sand particles got in there. Jin-Woo whimpered and groaned for a long time, before powerlessly falling flat on his back. He didn't have any energy left to lift even a finger. What was that? Jin-Woo continued to pant heavily when a new message appeared before him. Jin-Woo's expression crumpled into something unsightly. A penalty quest. Did he do something worthy of being punished? Jin-Woo carefully retreaded his memories until he recalled that he abandoned midway yesterday. Could it be? Now that he thought about it, it definitely said that if the quest was not completed, he'd be hit with a corresponding penalty. Jin-Woo lapped the outer perimeter of the hospital once and arrived back in front of his room. He was currently bent over and panting out heavily. His heart felt like it might explode at any second, but he couldn't give up yet. I worked so crazy hard until now, so no way I would. He somehow managed to open the door and took a step forward. It was finally over. Pant, pant. Jin-Woo fell down to his knees. His breath reeked of something sweet and bitter. His face and back were soaked in sweat. Pant, pant. As Jin-Woo tried to regulate his heavy, rough breathing while thick sweat drops continuously dripped down, a familiar message popped up in front of his eyes. Jin-Woo momentarily thought about forgetting about everything and simply laying down in defeat, but quickly changed his mind. At least for now, he wanted to confirm what these reward things could actually be with his own eyes first. Confirm. Reward 1. Full recovery of the current physical condition. Reward 2. 3 additional stat points. Reward 3. 1 random box. Why are there so many of them? That was the first thought to enter his dazed mind after he took a gander at the contents of his rewards. But, when he thought about it a little deeper, one of those rewards seemed rather useful right now. And there was also one that made him curious about what it could actually mean. For now, he urgently needed the first reward available. He was on the brink of collapsing here, since there really was a penalty for failure. The odds of completion rewards being real were pretty DMN high as well. Well, trying wouldn't hurt anyways, right? Seriously, this thing wouldn't throw him back into the penalty zone again after it said it'd give him the rewards, now would it? When Jin-Woo shifted his gaze around, he spotted a small box resting on top of the bed as well as his own stat window floating in the air. I guess that thing over there is the random box. The important thing was his stat window, though. This window displayed simple information about himself. What he paid attention to was the skills column. A passive skill called Tenacity and an active one called Dash. For some reason, he felt rather familiar with them. I remember now. Yesterday, or to be more precise, back in the early dawn of this morning. He remembered hearing those words while being chased around by the centipedes in the penalty zone. It happened probably after 3 hours of him constantly running for his dear life. He was suddenly greeted by a couple of new messages. The daily quest that would continue to show up every day, and the stat points as the reward. As long as this unexplainable phenomenon didn't come to a sudden end, he'd be able to live a completely different life to the one he'd been leading until now. This was an unbelievable opportunity for him. Besides that, the stat window also showed his level. Does this mean I can also increase my level, too? Eventually, though, Jin-Woo shook his head. There's no way. Now that would be too good to be true. He wasn't hoping that far, anyway. The rewards from the quests alone were plenty enough for him. It had been a week since he started taking on the daily quests. Several changes took place during this time. One of them happened to be the transformation of his body. He had definitely changed. His body was in the middle of a transformation. I've got muscles now. The most eye-catching change was the drastic increase of his muscles. The normal-looking flabby flesh was gradually disappearing, only to be replaced by hard muscles. Thanks to that, his shoulders had widened more and his overall frame had grown bigger as well. Even then, doesn't seem heavy and slow. Only the necessary amount of muscles in the necessary places. If you were to describe the overall impression his body gave off, then would it be kinda like looking swift and athletic? He was a guy and even he found this rather appealing, so it wasn't such a strange thing for young nurses to whisper about him. And it's all due to this guy over here. However, it is way too eye-catching, isn't it? The number of times he was mentioned by the nurses was constantly on the rise. It was quite likely that, since their job involved looking after human bodies, their levels of discernment could have been higher than most. Jinwoo possessed quite a keen sense of hearing, so whenever his name was mentioned in the vicinity, he took note of it. I guess it's time for me to leave this hospital. It was not good to be the center of attention. Not only would he feel uncomfortable being placed under the spotlight, but he also didn't want to let others know of this strange phenomenon. Didn't the old saying go something like, scratching unnecessarily results in more flakes to clean up, or something like that? He wanted to increase his stat points as quietly as possible, and it shouldn't be a problem for me to leave the hospital now, too. Thankfully, tests had shown that he was normal and healthy, meaning he could leave at any time he wanted. No, hang on a minute, it kind of felt like that both the hospital and the association wanted him to leave in the first place. Well, it'd be a waste to spend that much money as hospital fee on a measly rankie like him. One of the special privileges the S-ranked hunters enjoyed was the government paying for all of their health-related expenses. Of course, that was a story happening in another cosmos as far as Jinwoo was concerned. So, he figured that it wouldn't be such a bad idea to leave this hospital right about now. And there was something he wanted to confirm as well. Now, where did I put it? Jinwoo rummaged around his pockets and brought something out. It was a key gleaming in a golden hue. It featured such a simple design that it could be passed off as an accessory at a casual glance. Type, key. A key that transfers you to an instant dungeon. Can be used at the third exit of the Hapjeong subway station. He found this key inside one of the random boxes he got as the daily quest rewards. At first, he wondered why a key would come out from there, but once he saw the rarity category, he immediately realized that this was no ordinary item. This was one of the reasons prompting him to get discharged from the hospital as well. An entrance key to the instant dungeon. Whether it was called instant or not, a dungeon was a dungeon. If it was about dungeons, then he had plenty of painful memories regarding those. I'm sure there will be no problems as long as I just take a quick peek inside. If things looked bad, all he had to do was run away. After all, he'd been running 10 kilometers every day for a while now, so he was pretty confident of running away, actually. And it was his mistake for taking it too lightly. Slam, slam. Is there a wall blocking me? He pounded on the invisible wall and shouted at the outside, but no one replied back. People continued to carry on with their own lives, that was all. Sometimes, someone approached the Hapjeong station, but they simply vanished as soon as coming in contact with this invisible wall. It was quite likely that the place he was in and the outside world were two separate dimensions. Jinwoo tried his hardest to force his way out of this place, which prompted a new alert message to pop up. It was the same message as before. The key in his possession disappeared as soon as he set foot inside the third exit of the subway station. By the time Jinwoo realized things had gone rather awry and hurriedly turned around to leave, it was already too late. He was thinking of finding a hidden gate or some kind of a doorway within the third exit that would transport him to a dungeon. But his expectation was completely off the mark, and quite different from the regular dungeons. He couldn't even leave as he pleased, too. It's different from other dungeons. Jinwoo spat out a long groan and looked behind him. What he could see now was the interior of the subway station that had transformed into a jungle. Walls were thick with twisting vines, and rancid odor akin to rotting corpses assaulted his senses. Hell, he even heard the cries of what sounded like wild beasts from afar every now and then, too. It wasn't that there was a hidden entrance somewhere near the entrance of the Hapjeong station, but the entire station had become a dungeon. Instead, Jinwoo nervously swallowed his saliva and slowly descended the steps. He held his breath and surveyed his surroundings, but he couldn't sense anything particular. However, it was truly forbidden to underestimate the dangers in a dungeon. Among the low-ranked monsters, there were quite a few that knew how to mask and hide their presence very well. No, maybe because they were so low ranked that they had no choice but to hide and wait to ambush their prey. Past the toilets, he entered deeper and encountered the underground shopping center. Shops were worn down and in complete disarray, looking more like a ruin than anything else. Seeing the human-less ruined shells of the shops dimly illuminated by the flickering overhead lamps, something felt rather ominously creepy and sinister. A few of the lamps continued to flicker as if their life was nearing the end. Everything seemed so quiet and still, but he did sense a gaze of something. And then there was this smell, too. The seriously rotten odor of an animal carcass with flies buzzing around was coming from somewhere. For Jin Woo, who had frequently entered dungeons, this was a rather familiar smell. This smell, an animal-type monster. Jin Woo deliberately turned around and presented his back, and very slowly retread the path he had taken until now. An animal would try pounce on the prey as soon as its back was shown. An animal-type monster would be no different. And so, it happened when he took his third step. Smash! The shop window of a clothing store behind him shattered into pieces and something jumped out. And this something, as soon as it landed on the ground, leapt towards Jin Woo's exposed neck in one go. Roar! It was a huge wolf with a reddish coat of fur. When he took a closer look, its name also appeared on top of its head, just like the centipedes from the penalty zone. Iron Fang Lichen. However, unlike before, its name was in white letters, not red. There is no time to waste here. Two more lichens jumped out from their hiding place from behind the shop's darkness. It was in a pack. Jin Woo's eyes grew wider. They bared their big fangs and closed the distance in an instant. It was at this moment that one of the lichens aimed for his face and leapt up. Jin Woo ducked low. The lichen flew over his head and landed face first on the ground after failing to stop in time. Screw this. Whoosh. Accompanied by a bone-chilling sound of wind parting ways, his fist flew straight forward. Pow! It took just one hit and the head of the lichen simply exploded. The corpse of the now headless lichen slammed into the ceiling above, and then powerlessly fell down to the ground. Thud! Jin Woo's eyes opened up very wide and he stared dumbfoundedly at his own fist. What an unexpected destructive power that was. My level rose up. To make sure that he didn't mishear that, Jin Woo hurriedly accessed his status window. His level really did go up. And when a level went up, a single point was added to all of his stats. As it turned out, it wasn't only the quest rewards that could impact the values of his stats. It was also possible to improve his stats through leveling up, too. To think, I can actually level up. He only carried a vague expectation, but it actually became reality. His movement speed had increased as well. If it was in the past, there was no way he'd be able to lightly evade the all-out attack of an animal, nor could his punch move fast enough to produce the sound of the air splitting apart. Right, the physical strength in my muscles has increased, so obviously my speed would have increased along the way, too. Simply by raising his strength stat higher, both his power and speed had gone up. The battle against the lichens proved this. The lichen that was definitely somewhere nearby had gone with the wind before he had noticed it. Jin Woo hurriedly scanned his surroundings, but he couldn't find a single trace of the creature. Quite likely, it had turned tail and ran away while he was immersed in the status windows. Well, he should have known something was up when it lowered its tail and cautiously studied his mood. Tisk. Jin Woo smacked his lips, realizing that a bundle of experience points had just escaped from his grasp. Hang on, do these things give away things like magic crystals, too? The sudden thought popping up in his head stopped him in his tracks. Monsters appearing within the gates all possessed one, or sometimes several, magic crystals in them. Jin Woo was also a hunter. He was successful in killing these monsters, so not being rewarded for his work kind of felt a bit like he was wronged somehow. Feeling a little rueful, he sliced open the lichen's stomach, but it turned out to be a waste of time. It seemed that these creatures were fundamentally different from the regular monsters. Jin Woo dusted his hands and was about to stand back up, but then he spotted something glittering within the dead lichen's mouth. So he opened the creature's maws. One of the lichen's fangs was emitting a beam of light. When Jin Woo reached out, a new message popped up before him. Sure thing. Rarity, none. Type, miscellaneous. A large and sharp canine of a lichen. Can be stored in the inventory or can be sold at the store. Jin Woo got flustered a bit while staring at the canine tooth. There was a store, too. Where would you find a system less friendly than the one he was saddled with? To think, it was designed in such a way that the end user had to personally experience it with his own body before learning about any of its functions. Hell, he wasn't given much of an explanation during the penalty quest and he almost died as a result back then. Jin Woo gnashed his teeth and tried to summon this store thing. Store. He couldn't help but feel his anticipation build up, wondering if a shop with a signboard declaring store and manned by an NPC merchant, kinda like from video games, might really appear before him. With the clinging sounds of coins, his inventory appeared next. Right at the bottom of the display, in the column saying gold, he could see the number 20 appearing there. That space had been empty yesterday. 20 gold, eh? He couldn't really use that money in real life, and he couldn't even use the store properly yet, so he had no idea just how much this 20 gold was actually worth. Oh well, a creature from the Ranky dungeon wouldn't have given me any decent loot to begin with. Even if there was a difference between the dungeons found beyond the gates and this so-called instant dungeon, it would be the same difference at the end of the day. The lichen he thought had ran away actually came back with a bunch of its friends. A wonderfully bright smile bloomed on Jin Woo's face. Even at a casual glance, there must be over 20 of them here. Eureka! Hang on a minute. Was that the right word to use in this sort of situation? Whatever, it was definitely a word to express one's joy anyway. Jin Woo tightly grasped the sword and spoke up. With the exception of your canines, I'm gonna massacre all of you. When the chilling glare of a man who was obsessed about making money landed on the lichens, they became intimidated and shuddered slightly. It was at this point that Jin Woo pounced on them without mercy. As he expected, his levels rose up quite quickly, simply from searching every nook and cranny of the first